She had built an empire from sweat, dignity, and a crystal-clear vision of humanity. He, her heir, had ascended to the throne, wearing the crown of power, but seemed to have forgotten the very essence that formed its foundation. A mother, driven by a profound concern, enters the universe of her own creation in disguise, seeking a truth that echoes in its most forgotten corners. What she is about to find is a bitter reality, a silent humiliation that hangs in the shadows of power and indifference. Because justice sometimes does not announce itself with shouts or alarms. It rises in silence, armed with a relentless force that no one would dare expect. The question remains, what exactly will the founder hear and witness that will compel her to act so immediately and decisively? In the beating heart of a vibrant metropolis, where skyscrapers vied for a place on the horizon, stood Nexus Innovations, a titan of technology whose glass panels gleamed under the afternoon sun, reflecting the deep blue sky. More than just a company, Nexus was an icon, synonymous with cutting-edge tech, bold progress, and a promising future, radiating an aura of success to the outside world. Its marketing campaigns promised an innovative and inclusive environment, a true corporate paradise. But within its meticulously clean hallways and climate-controlled offices, which once pulsed with the energy of a shared purpose, something dark had begun to fester, a dissonance between its public image and its internal reality. The silence of the night, meant to bring peace to the empty offices after an intense day, now seemed to carry an invisible weight, a nearly palpable tension. With every sunset, as the monitors went dark and the last employees dispersed, the gleam of modernity gave way to a heavy atmosphere where the dignity of some was gradually and mercilessly crushed under the weight of misused power, a growing shadow of inhumanity creeping through the foundations of the once thriving organization. It was a disturbing contrast that foretold something larger, something about to unfold in the labyrinths of that empire. The central and almost mythical figure of this drama was Eleanor Vance, a 65-year-old woman whose fine wrinkles told the story of a lifetime of quiet struggles, resilience, and hard-won victories. She wasn't just the founder. She was the brilliant mind behind every innovation, the soul who injected purpose into Nexus, the living legend who built the company from nothing, starting in a small garage and transforming it into a global colossus, always grounded in unwavering pillars of mutual respect, equal opportunity, and a culture of human value. Her wisdom was the company's moral compass. Her only son, Ethan Vance, a 35-year-old CEO, had inherited command of the vast corporation. With a flawless resume from the world's top universities and a keen eye for business, Ethan was, in theory, the ideal successor. However, in his climb to the top, he seemed to have disconnected from the daily reality of his employees, especially those who formed the base of the operational pyramid. Far from the lavish executive suites, on the floors below where manual labor was often invisible to upper management, a contrasting and increasingly oppressive reality existed. There, on the factory floor and in the maintenance corridors, the presence of the General Services Supervisor, Greg, was a constant threat. He was a man with a scowling face, possessing a rigidity that bordered on inhumanity, whose power over the lowest-ranking workers was wielded with a subtle but constant tyranny. Alongside him, the project manager Jessica, an ambitious young woman with a promising future, saw the cleaning staff not as individuals, but as mere disposable objects, interchangeable parts in a machine she believed she had the right to control. The hierarchy, once based on merit, had devolved into a cruel chasm between absolute power and forced submission, where small signs of injustice, veiled disrespect, or exclusion were a daily routine. Empathy was evaporating, making it clear who was about to be challenged by a force they could scarcely imagine. The turning point in this saga of power and inhumanity came when Eleanor, feeling a growing unease and troubled by rumors of a rapid, alarming cultural shift within the company she had built with such care, decided it was time to act. She needed to see it with her own eyes, to feel it on her own skin. So donning a simple, faded janitor's uniform and using a fake name, Helen, which gave her perfect anonymity, she plunged into the grueling routine of her own company's most invisible workers. One night, as the building stood nearly deserted, while she was polishing a seemingly endless hallway to a high shine, Greg, the supervisor with the grating voice and intimidating presence, confronted her. His eyes narrowed with contempt. "Helen, you're new here, right? Let me make something crystal clear. We don't pay people to be slow. If I can't see my own reflection in this floor, I mean shining like a mirror, then don't even bother coming back tomorrow." Before Eleanor could even take a deep breath, he, with a calculated gesture of pure arrogance, knocked over a cup of freshly brewed, still-hot coffee right onto the floor she had just made impeccable. The dark, viscous stain spread slowly across the light-colored tile, but the pain Eleanor felt was far greater, a sharp pang of public humiliation that pierced her soul. Eleanor's blood ran cold, her mind seething with indignation, but she maintained the composure her disguise demanded. Without a word, she bent down, picked up a cloth, and began to clean the mess, feeling every fiber of her being cry out for justice, as silent rage mingled with the unshakable resolve to expose the rot that had infested her legacy. The disrespectful scene, unfortunately, was not an isolated incident. It repeated itself with even greater cruelty days later. As Helen, the anonymous new janitor, meticulously cleaned the main conference room, a space that had once been the stage for her greatest achievements as CEO, Jessica, the project manager, strode in, exuding her usual air of superiority, followed by a group of subordinates who trailed her like shadows. Jessica's eyes locked onto Helen, and a disdainful smirk played on her lips. "Still here, Helen? Your sluggishness is holding up our crucial meeting," she snapped, her voice dripping with impatience. Then, without any warning or provocation, in a sharp, calculated motion, Jessica raised her hand and slapped Helen across the face. The sharp crack echoed in the conference room, shattering the silence with unexpected violence. Helen staggered back from the impact, her cleaning tools clattering to the floor around her feet. The shock of the blow and the public humiliation left her momentarily paralyzed. The silence that followed the assault was deafening, thick, filled only by the tense breathing of those present. None of Jessica's employees dared to intervene. Their gazes were fixed on the floor, the fear palpable, a silent complicity that stung even more than the slap. The physical pain was minimal compared to the searing humiliation of being assaulted in the very company she, Eleanor Vance, had built from scratch. Water streamed down her face, no longer from a spilled coffee cup, but from the silent tears that mixed with her contained rage and profound sorrow for what her company had become. The loneliness of that moment was overwhelming, crushing, but paradoxically, it was in this abyss of pain that an unshakable flame of determination ignited within her, promising a reckoning. If this scene makes your blood boil as much as it did mine, hit that like button and subscribe. The comeback is going to surprise you. Just wait. In the days following the assault and humiliation, Eleanor, under the discreet guise of Helen, continued her silent journey through the halls of Nexus Innovations. Every insult from Greg, every scornful gesture from Jessica, and even every indifferent glance from managers who passed her as if she were invisible, only served to solidify her unwavering decision. She was no longer just a passive observer. Every sweep of the broom, every wipe of a cloth was an act of evidence gathering. She was methodically and almost imperceptibly weaving an invisible net of information, accumulating irrefutable proof. The woman who once stood at the pinnacle of corporate power, deciding the fate of millions, now, with hands calloused by a mop handle, was studying the company from the bottom up. She noticed the details that were once invisible to her, the cracks in the walls of corporate ethic. Eleanor saw how the internal complaint system was systematically ignored, how the pleas of the cleaning staff were simply filed away without investigation, and how true meritocracy had been replaced by a cult of arrogance, where flattery was valued more than competence. Ethan, her only son, the young CEO she had prepared for the business world, was completely oblivious. Immersed in his routine of high-level meetings and market analyses, he lived in a bubble of apparent success. He had no idea that the very soul of his company was being eaten away from the inside, a silent disease threatening his family's legacy. And he certainly never imagined that the quiet janitor he barely noticed in the hallways, the woman with the tired eyes and slow movements, was in fact the forgotten guardian of his empire. The original driving force who was silently preparing a revolution that would shake Nexus Innovations to its core. The seed of change had been planted, and no one but Eleanor knew how close it was to blooming. The moment of reckoning arrived unexpectedly, with the gravity of a silent tribunal. Eleanor, now back in her identity as the founding matriarch, called an emergency meeting of Nexus's entire senior leadership. The conference room, usually a stage for discussions of numbers and projections, was now charged with a palpable tension. Her son, Ethan, was there, alongside Greg and Jessica, all dressed in their impeccable business attire, wearing confident smiles that would soon vanish. Eleanor, without her janitor's disguise, sat at the head of the table, her presence filling the room with an authority that hadn't been felt in a long time. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her calm was, in itself, an overwhelming force. With a serenity that was almost unsettling, she began projecting a series of videos and audio recordings onto the large screen. The images and voices that emerged were cruel and undeniable. In one clip, Greg was seen berating Sophia, a young immigrant cleaner, with cutting words. In another, Jessica, the project manager, was caught slapping Helen, Eleanor herself in disguise. Recorded phone calls with Diane, the HR director, revealed her complete disregard for harassment complaints. The smiles on Greg's and Jessica's faces instantly disappeared, replaced by a growing dread and a pallor that betrayed their guilt. They glanced at each other, terror reflected in their eyes. Ethan, the CEO, watched, paralyzed by shock, the raw truth of his company unraveling before him. The weight of the revelation was crushing. The final recording showed in disturbing detail Jessica striking Helen, the slap echoing once more in everyone's memory. At the end of the video, Eleanor rose slowly, her stature seeming even greater in that moment. Her sharp, penetrating eyes fixed on Greg and Jessica. Finally, her gaze fell upon Ethan, filled with a complex mixture of disappointment and unconditional love. "This company," Eleanor began, her voice firm and calm, resonating with an authority that needed no proof, was built on solid pillars of respect, integrity, and human dignity, not on cowardly intimidation and contempt for those who keep it running. She paused, letting her words sink in. "What you just witnessed is the direct result of what happens when greed and arrogance replace humanity." Greg and Jessica, pale and trembling, tried to stammer out excuses, but the words failed them. Ethan, in deep shock, could barely process what was happening. He just watched his mother, the true force behind the empire. Eleanor then turned towards the conference room door, her final gesture heavy with symbolism. "Greg and Jessica, your terminations are immediate and irrevocable. Your actions will not be tolerated in this company." Her eyes returned to Ethan, her expression softer but still serious. "Ethan, we need to have a very serious talk about the future of this company. It is not just a business. It is, above all, a dignified environment for every single person who works here, from the top executive to the most dedicated janitor." The room, once the stage of humiliation, fell into a reverent, absolute silence. The legend had returned, not to reclaim her throne, but to restore the soul of her creation. The story of Eleanor and Nexus Innovations offers us a profound and timeless lesson. The true value of a company, its resilience and its lasting legacy, lies not merely in its financial statements or its stratospheric profits, but fundamentally in the dignity and well-being of every one of its employees. It shows us with crystal clarity that unchecked arrogance and the abuse of power have the corrosive potential to destroy even the most solid foundation. However, the narrative also offers a message of hope. Justice, when sought with unwavering resilience, strategic intelligence and quiet courage, will always find a way to prevail. It is a vivid and urgent reminder that genuine empathy, unconditional respect, and human compassion are and must be the non-negotiable pillars for building any healthy and prosperous workplace. True leadership, Eleanor teaches us, is not measured by the power one wields over others, but by the ability to uplift, protect, and inspire everyone, regardless of their position. It is a reflection on the importance of never losing sight of the humanity at the core of any enterprise. If this story touched your heart as it touched ours and made you reflect on the importance of dignity and respect, share this video with someone who needs to hear this powerful message. And for more real, emotional and inspiring stories like this, subscribe to our channel and become part of our community.